Good day, everyone. Today we will talk about the different principles in teaching listening and technological tools. So, listening is a neglected communication skill, and while all of us have had instructions in writing, in reading, in speaking, few have had any formal instruction in listening. Most of us have spent 7 of every 10 minutes of our waking time in some form of communication activity. Of this 7 minutes, 10% is spent in writing, 15% is spent in reading, 30 in talking, and 45% in listening. Just think of it. We spend nearly half of our communication time listening, but few of us have any real effort to be better listeners. For those who do, however, the effort pays great dividends. Higher productivity, faster learning, and better relationship. In particular, listening comprehension lessons are vehicles for teaching elements of grammatical structure, and it allows new vocabulary items to be contextualized within the body of communicative discourse. So, what is listening, by the way? So let us have few definition. So listening is to pay attention, to be specific, to hear something with thoughtful attention. Okay. What else? Listening is to be alert, to catch an expected sound. Okay. So these are only few definitions of listening, but in order for us to fully understand it, let us have the different models of listening and language instruction. Okay. So listening should not be regarded as a passive skill, as I always try to mention. Listening should be beyond just sound discrimination associated to pronunciation learning. Listening alongside with reading was regarded as a passive skill and was simply taken for granted, which should not be the case because listening offers more than that. Okay. So, however, slowly and steadily, more attention has been given to listening comprehension. Today, the role of listening and the purpose of listening comprehension in our curriculum can be one of the four different perspectives. So, a general instructional model that reflects underlying beliefs about language learning theory should be considered with the following models of listening and language instruction. Okay, so we have four main models of listening and language instruction. The first one is listening and repeating, followed by listening and comprehension questions. And the third, fast listening. And last but not the least, we have interactive listening. So let us start with this model, listening and repeating. So its main goal is to pattern, to listen, and to imitate and to memorize. Okay, so it is based on a hearing and pattern matching model, meaning to say the students will try to listen and try to imitate the sounds produced by the teacher or by an audio material. Okay, so what are the procedures in this model of listening and language instruction? So as the students do, listen to a word and phrase or sentence. After that, ask the students to repeat or imitate it. And next, ask the students to memorize it. Often, but not always, as part of the procedure. No? Okay, so what is the importance of listening and repeating? It enables students to do pattern drills, to repeat dialogues, and to use memorized patterns in conversation. It enables them to imitate pronunciation patterns. So somehow it has a touch of bottom-up model. Okay. And in here, higher level cognitive processing and use of language structuring are not necessarily an intentional focus, because the focus is more on repetition, imitation of sounds. Next model, listening and answering comprehension questions. So what are the goals of this model? It is to process discrete point information, to listen and answer comprehension question. So this model is based on a listening and question answering model with occasional innovative variations on this scheme. So basically the pattern here is the students will listen and they will have to answer comprehension questions, but depending on the teacher, they can add a few more other variations of it, but the main theme of it is to listen and to answer. So what are the procedures in this model? So first one is ask the students to listen to an oral text along with continuum from sentence length to lecture length. And then next, ask the students to answer primarily factual questions. And then you may proceed with other types of questions to assess their listening comprehension. Okay, so talking about types of questions that we can ask to assess their listening comprehension, let us also discuss, or let me also introduce to you the kinds of listening. So we have several. We have comprehensive listening, critical listening, appreciative listening, and therapeutic listening. Whereas in comprehensive listening, it is that type of listening where the students listen for the content of the message or the gist of the message. Next, critical listening. So students judge the message, or they try to evaluate the message of the listening material. Next, we also have appreciative listening. Students listen for enjoyment and for leisure. Then we also have therapeutic listening. Students listen to support others rather than to judge them. So that is, once again, listening and answering questions, and considering as well the different types of listening. So what is the importance of listening and answering question model? So it enables students to manipulate discrete pieces of information, hopefully with increasing speed and accuracy. So it will increase students' vocabulary and grammar in constructions as well. And it will not require your students to make use of information for any real communicative purpose yet, beyond answering questions. Okay, so it is somehow not a two-way communication, because they will only respond to the questions posted by the teacher. Okay, so these are the first two, listening and repeating, and listening and answering comprehension questions. And as you can remember, as I always try to mention, listening should not be considered as a passive skill. That's why we have several models to discuss. To ensure that as they listen, they also try to think of the answers asked by the teacher. Okay? And another, to ensure that listening will not be considered as a passive skill, we have our third model, which is the task listening. So what is the main goal, or what are the goals of task listening? So to process spoken discourse for functional purposes, to listen and to do something with information, and to carry out real tasks using the information received. So Several activities here will require the students respond based on what the teacher asked them to do. So it is also based on listening and using model, or listening and do model. Whereas the students listen, then immediately do something with the information received. They follow different directions given, they complete a task, they solve a problem, they transmit the gist of information orally or in writing. They listen and take lecture notes and others. So what are the procedures in this model? So ask the students to listen and process the information. And then after that, ask the students to use the orally transmitted language input immediately to complete a task, whether that is to take notes or to follow direction or to complete a task or to solve a problem or to identify the gist of the information given. Okay, and it is task oriented as well. So task listening model, the focus is on instruction that is task oriented and not question oriented. If that is question oriented, then that will be model number 2, listening and answering comprehension questions. The purpose is to engage learners in using informational content presented in spoken discourse and not just in answering questions. So there are two types of tasks or listening tasks. We have the language analysis task. It is designed to help learners develop cognitive and metacognitive language learning strategies. And the next one is the language use task. So it is designed to give students practice in listening, to get the meaning from the input with the express purpose of making functional use of it immediately. Okay, so these are the several tasks, or listening tasks for our students. So again, we have 3 models for the meantime, as of now, I mean. So we have listening and repeating, listening and answering questions, listening tasks or task listening, and the next one is interactive listening. So what is the main goal of it? To develop oral skills in semi-formal interactive academic communication. It also aims to develop critical listening, critical thinking, and effective speaking abilities of our students. So instructional material. So features real-time and real-life give and take academic communication. So in here, your students will be able to communicate with each other. So one will act as a listener and the other one will act as a speaker and vice versa. So this model provides a variety of student presentation and discussion activities, both individual and small group panel reports that include follow-up audience participation in question-answer sessions as an integral part of the work. So it follows an interactive listening, thinking, speaking model with bidirectional listening and speaking. When we say bidirectional, it is a two-way kind of communication. So this model includes attention to group bonding and classroom discussion. Okay, that's why as teacher, we will think of activities where our students will be able to interact with each other. So what are the procedures under this model? Continuous, or ask the students to continuously decode the spoken discourse. Simultaneous cognitive reacting, acting upon the information received, and instant response encoding. So pretty much it tells us that there should be communication between one learner to another learner, or from one learner to other learners. So what is the importance of this model? The focus here is instruction that is communicative and competence oriented, as well as task oriented. Learners have opportunity to engage in and develop the complex array of communicative skills in 4 competency areas. What are those? Listening competence. What else? Discourse competence, social linguistic competence, and strategic competence. So that is interactive listening. So if they interact with each other with a particular task in mind, we will be able to develop the communicative competencies of our students. Okay, and talking about task listening, interactive listening, and listening and answering comprehension questions, the best activity or best lesson plan design that we can think of will be, once again, the problem-based and the project-based learning. Okay, because if we can ask our students to try to solve a particular problem and conduct a particular program or activity to solve it, then they will be given the chance to interact with each other. They will be given the chance to perform a particular task and answer several questions to solve or to accomplish the task given to them. So these are the different models of listening and language instruction. Next time, let us talk about the modes of listening. So we have 3 main modes of listening. We have the first one, bidirectional listening mode, followed by unidirectional listening mode, and last but not the least, auto-directional listening mode. So when we say bidirectional listening mode, obviously it is two-way communication. In here, a student may act as either a speaker and a listener. So 2 participants take turns in exchanging speaker role and listener role as they engage in face-to-face or virtual verbal interaction. So that is bidirectional listening mode. Next, unidirectional listening mode. So it is the second mode, and it is also called one-way listening. Auditory input surrounds us as we move through the day. The input comes from a variety of sources: overheard conversations, public address announcements, recorded messages, to name few. We also have instructional situations of all kinds and public performances. Let's say concert, musicals, operas, plays, religious services, and lectures, to name few. As we hear speakers but are unable to interact with them, we often talk to ourselves in a reactive and self-dialogue manner as we analyze what we hear. And that is unidirectional listening mode, or one-way listening. Then we also have autodirectional listening mode. So we can think of this as the self-dialogue communication, in which we may not be aware of our internal roles as both speaker and listener or reactor in our own thought processes. That's why metacognitive thinking strategies are very important, because we will be able to both become speakers and listeners in our thought processes. So sometimes we recreate language internally and listen again as we retell or relive communication interludes. Okay, So in here, we try to think of alternatives. We try to plan strategies, and we try to make decisions, all by talking to ourselves and listening to ourselves. So that is autodirectional listening. So what is the implication of these modes in instruction? So second language learners need to have instruction and practice in both bidirectional listening mode and unidirectional listening mode. In addition, autodirectional or self-dialogue should not be ignored as well. It is important feature of language behavior which should be discussed with students. So autodirectional talk is something which learners should be developing at their own right in order for them to know how to um, learn by themselves. So these are the modes of listening. So we should come up with several activities where our students will be able to apply interacting with each other or receive information from a listening material, or think of activities as well where our students will be able to assess themselves, which is then autodirectional listening. Next, let us also talk about psychosocial functions of listening. So there are two major divisions in the psychosocial functions of listening. The first one is called transactional language function, and the other one is interactional language function. So these functions of listening are opposite to each other. So let us talk about transactional language function first. Transactional language is message-oriented. Once again, message-oriented. It can be viewed as business-type talk with the focus on content and conveying factual and propositional information. So transactional language is used for one, giving instruction, explaining, describing, giving directions, ordering, inquiring, requesting, relating, and checking on the correctness of details and verifying understanding. So all of these are for one specific purpose, which is again to focus on the content and information. So the premium is on message clarity and precision in this transactional language function. On the other hand, interactional language function, the most important difference between the two types of language use is that interactional language function is more on social type talk. If a while back, transactional is message-oriented, this one is person-oriented. Kung kanina in transactional language, it is business type. In interactional language function, it is social type. So the main objective of interactional language function is the establishment and maintenance of social relationship. Okay, and once again, if we're going to check the different communicative competencies, we have social linguistic competence and strategic competence. So with this interactional language function, we will be able to ensure that the social linguistic competence and strategic competence of our students will also be developed. Important features of interactional language are those with identifying the other person's concern, being nice to other person, and maintaining and respecting other people. Okay, and if we're going to check again the kinds of listening, so we'll be able to have appreciative listening and therapeutic listening as primary examples of interactional language function. Okay, and as for the transactional language function, these are examples here are the comprehensive listening and the critical listening. So what are the implications of these functions of listening in instruction? So teachers need to provide practice experiences in both transactional talk and interactional talk. While the contrast between the two types of talk is usually clear, sometimes it is not so obvious in an interaction where the two functions may be combined. So come up with activities where your students will be able to express their emotions, their experiences with each other, which is interactional function, but at the same time, they should be talking about a particular information that you ask them to talk about, which is then transactional function. So, kumbaga, you hit two birds at a time, okay, or in one stone. Okay, so again, psychosocial functions of listening. Okay. Next, this time, since we have already discussed few principles in teaching listening, this time let us also consider the affective domain. So listening should not just be about information at all. We should also consider the following: intellectual attitudes, emotional attitudes, and moral attitudes of our students. When we say intellectual attitudes, this include expression of comprehension of agreement or disagreement, or confirming or denying, accepting or declining, forgetting or remembering, possibility and impossibility, and others. Right? On the other hand, when we say emotional attitudes, it includes expressing of pleasure and displeasure, or interest and lack of it, surprise, expression of hope, expression of fear, worry, satisfaction, dissatisfaction, and others. And when we say moral attitudes, so these are expressed in language of apologizing, expressing approval or disapproval, appreciation, indifference, regret, and more. So these are the affective domain that should be considered whenever we are designing a lesson plan, developing the listening skills of our students. So after reviewing the different principles in teaching listening, we may now proceed with the different technologies in teaching that macro skill. So the first one is podcasts. So what is a podcast? It is a digital audio file that is made available on the internet for downloading to a computer or to a mobile device, typically available as a series, and a new installment of which can be received by subscribers automatically. So to know more about podcasts, let us watch this video.
In the last 15 years, podcasts have gone from mainly a niche market to mainstream. There's a world of info and entertainment for people of all interests, so listen up, we have Podcast 101 on the lowdown. There are over 500,000 podcasts in existence, but that doesn't mean we all know what they are.
A podcast is simply a piece of audio, a story or an interview or a documentary series that you can download and listen to whenever you want.
Chris Bannon, Chief Content Officer at Stitcher, a podcast app, is here with a lesson on podcasts. First, where did they come from?
Podcasting has been around for more than a decade, but I would say that it became really, really popular. It exploded in 2014 with the publication of a series called Serial.
I definitely understand that someone could look at this and say, oh man, he must be lying. It's so coincidental.
And since then, there's now something for everyone, from shows about true crime to news.
From the New York Times, I'm Michael Barbaro. This is The Daily.
And from comedy to fantasy.
Well, this one's named Logan, but he just got another name as well.
Wolverine. Today, as many as 100 million people are listening each month to the 18.5 million available episodes from the 700,000 podcasts out there. But unlike AM/FM radio, podcasts play through apps. So here's how to tune in.
Stitcher has built the first widely available Android app. So Apple has an app that's built into the iPhone. Spotify is getting into the podcasting business in a big way.
You can listen on your smart device through the app or on a computer from the website.
If you click that little subscribe button, it will make sure to feed you new episodes of the show.
Which leads us to the third part of the lesson. What are some of today's fan favorites?
Right now, I think there's never been more variety in what's popular in podcasting. Dirty John is a series that came out a couple of years ago.
Whether to intimidate people or to impress them with his dark glamour, he bragged frequently about his underworld ties.
This true crime podcast is also a hit series on Bravo.
John.
People like Conan O'Brien, the TV talk show host and comedian, have gotten into podcasting in a big way.
Conan tends to pop his peas every time he says podcast.
Podcast. This makes the engineer crazy.
Oprah, Dr. Phil.
The hardest part is choosing where to start. That's today's lesson in Podcast 101 on the Lowdown.
Okay, so that is a podcast.
In the last
Almost the same with AM and FM radio stations. It's just that podcast is more accessible than those, and it offers a variety of listening materials, not just intended for education, but also for entertainment, for entertainment purposes and for informative purposes as well. Okay, so when might I use podcast in an English lesson? So there are several suggestions here. One is we can use podcasts to teach listening skills to our students because it is purely audio in the part of our students. So meaning to say, they won't be assisted by the videos or animations created by those people who created podcasts. So they will only depend on their listening skills in order for them to appreciate and to comprehend with the material. Okay, next, we use podcasts in English lessons to teach note-taking skills of our students. So it will fall under the task listening, where we can ask our students to listen and perform a particular task. So for this one, in order for them to comprehend with the material, they will have to take down notes. Next, we use podcasts in our classes to help make connections across different genres, because podcast offers variety of genres, not just news, not just stories. It also has several interviews and others for entertainment purposes and for both and for informative purposes as well. And we use podcasts to facilitate project-based learning. Okay, and again, when we say project-based learning and problem-based learning, we may use podcasts in here so that they may identify a specific problem or project that they may want to talk about in order for them to solve it, in order for them to come up with an activity or project that they may want to conduct. And podcasts may help them to do that as well. Next, we also have suggestions in using podcasts in our lessons. So one is sketchnoting, or a variety of taking notes. So first is hand out large pieces of papers and the colorful markers to our students, or they will have to provide this by themselves, and encourage them to play an encouraging podcast and instruct students to draw, write keywords, link ideas, and make connections to come up with this sketch noting. So it is the same with note-taking activities, but in here we will be able to ask our student to do more and be creative in taking down notes of what they hear in podcasts. Next, another lesson plan ideas in using podcasts, discussions or Socratic seminars. So instruct the students to listen to a podcast and take note. You may search for several worksheets that they may use, and then hold a Socratic discussion in response to the podcast. This hits both listening and speaking goals, meaning to say they will respond to each other's discussion or take in what they heard in that podcast that you asked them to listen with. Another lesson plan ideas for podcasts, outside time. Okay, so since podcast is initially intended for entertainment purposes, for informative purposes, rather than for educational purposes, why not ask your students to listen to any podcast material that they have downloaded or that they have in their cell phones, and just let them enjoy this listening materials. Okay, so that way they'll be able to listen to it and develop their listening skills at the same time without any pressure at all. Okay. Anyway, we have again what we call appreciative type of listening, where we ask our student to listen for enjoyment. And next, I think this one's also a good idea in using podcasts. Write a poem. Okay, so have students listen to a podcast and just write down words or phrases, lots and lots of them that they pick up on. They could be this could be a list or a sketch note. Okay, so ask them to take down notes, and after that, ask the students to write a poem using these words. So this is a great way to turn nonfiction into poetry. Okay, so you might be asking them to listen to a nonfiction listening material in podcast, but they can turn that and all other information to poetry, which is I think is a very creative way of using podcasts in our classes. And That is podcast. Okay, and again, the difference between AM and FM radio programs and podcasts is it offers a variety of materials and it is easily accessible to everyone since most of us already have smartphones. So we can download it and we can have different access of materials. And aside from the fact that um, the speakers most of the time are native speakers of the language, so um, we can imitate the sounds, we can learn from them in terms of delivery of words and phrases, sentences using the language. Next, we can also use different news and public affairs networks or websites like BBC, like CNN, and others. So in here, we can ask our students to listen and watch videos, articles in this website. Okay, and this is a good way to ensure that your students will learn in an authentic way because these materials are authentic rather than just delimiting them in the textbooks provided by your school. So if you work with advanced language learners, BBC offers news articles, videos, and audios in various languages. This is a great place for finding authentic resources for listening and reading practice. Next, we also have Yabla. Okay, so what is Yabla? It offers authentic videos for improving listening in several languages. However, this one's not really for free, so we'll skip this one. We also have innovative language. So what is innovative language? It offers integrated language lesson in over 30 languages. So in here, we can watch videos or we can listen to audiobooks available. No? Although this one's also require premium accounts in order for us to maximize in order for us to utilize the materials. Okay, so again, they offer audio and video lessons that learners can view on their laptops or their mobile phones. And last but not the least, we also have lyrics training where we can ask our students or we can enable our students to develop their listening skills and language proficiency by listening to songs and through music. So it is the new way to learn English and other languages through music and lyrics of your favorite songs. So it improves and it gives your learners the enjoyment of learning and at the same time singing songs. Okay, so thousands of learners all over the world are already using lyrics training to teach language and motivate their students through this unique immersion process. This program lets you take advantage of your active study time rather than passively listening throughout the day. So with song lyrics, when you learn to add new phrase, it seems like you are adding new vocabulary as well. And it is a phrase or a sentence or a word that you can turn back on and utilize the grammatical construction of it while in conversation. So memorizing lyrics and songs in one or is one of the fastest way of storing mass amount of sentences in one's brain. So as you ask your students to sing a song or memorize the lyrics, so there are a lot of benefits from it. One is they will familiarize themselves with the structure of of that language, because in here they will have to fill out the missing gaps in that particular song. So as they listen to the song, they familiarize themselves with it, the language structure. And aside from that, they also develop listening skills because as they listen to it, they also try to imitate the pronunciation and the delivery of the native speakers. So this is one good way of learning the language, but at the same time trying to enjoy the activity as well. Okay, so these are the different technologies in teaching listening. Okay, so that's all for today, guys. Thank you so much.